Hello, I'm Emma Kent, and I am a structural engineer. I love my job because I get to design really cool buildings, and I get to solve some interesting problems, and I get to listen to men snigger about their awesome erection sequences on a daily basis. So tonight I'm going to take you on like a quick tour through some of my career highlights, and hopefully we're going to answer some interesting questions like, what is a woman's role on a building site? How much work is too much work? And why do structural engineers find full penetration butt welds so awkward? It wasn't easy starting a career in engineering, and before I went to university I spent a year on site learning the ways of the construction industry. My project was a Tesco in Harlow, which is a town best known for having the M11 as highlighted on its Wikipedia page. So I remember thinking to myself when I started on site that this supermarket must have a garden centre attached, and I thought perhaps my role on this building site was going to involve a watering can because there was such a big plant room.
That deserved better.
Luckily, I had some exceptional role models to help teach me the ways of the construction industry, like one particular site manager, a red-faced, red-haired Scot, who genuinely thought that a woman's place on a building site was making cups of strong tea and taking meeting minutes. I know. It all came to a head one day when I'd duly had some drawings printed for him, and I stomped into his office and slammed them on his desk, snarling, "There you go," in my best impression of a secretary. As I turned to leave, the hairy old lech grabbed my arse for a good old feel and then patted me on the bottom with a little "off you go, darling." And off I went, straight to HR. Not that that worked out particularly well either, because they seemed to somehow think that it was my fault, although I'm still not actually sure what my fault was, like existing, having a nice arse. To this day, one of my biggest regrets about that job is that I didn't turn round and knee the hairy old lech in his saggy, middle-aged balls with a cheery, "There you go, darling." But I think that's just the beauty of hindsight and the wisdom of age. Anyway, I moved from there into the structural delivery team at King's Cross Station, which was a serious upgrade from Harlow. And I started to find out more about what my role on a building site was. I was responsible for checking and supervising all of the concrete pours. Yeah. Which, as a young and naive 19 years old by this time woman, meant that I was mostly subjected to lewd comments by welly-wearing labourers about what they'd like to do with their poker vibrators. My usual response was something along the lines of, "Yeah, that's a good idea. Piss off the only first aider on site. What are you going to do when your incompetent stomping around fills your boots with wet concrete again today? Who'll salve your cement burns then, eh?" Anyway, one of the phrases that I therefore most commonly used to hear on site was along the lines of, "Cheer up, darling, it might never happen." And I would love it if all female engineers replied with, "The moment you opened your mouth, it literally did just happen." Anyway, fast forward 8 years in my career, and faced with near certain redundancy or relocating to the sun-drenched shores of Sydney for double my salary. Despite the obvious attractions of rainy grey England, I decided to head off for Oz. Now my dad, who's in the audience tonight, hi Dad. My dad's Australian, so I felt that my upbringing had culturally prepared me for this new challenge. But being called a Sheila and described as having a voice like a two-stroke motor were the least of my problems. I found myself working for a gentleman with a 50-year-long service history and a habit of shouting, sorry about my Australian accent by the way, or he didn't say that, but anyway, a habit of shouting, "Emma, get in here!" from his office, usually because his coffee had gone cold, or he needed another ream of paper for his printer. Bizarrely, these skills were absent from the curriculum during the 4 years that I studied for a master's degree in civil engineering. Luckily, I'd had plenty of practice in Harlow, so I knew I was up to the task. This guy actually used to print out all of his emails, write the response by hand, and then pass them to his secretary to type up for him to send. And obviously, his ability to send an email gave great confidence in his ability to design a state-of-the-art science laboratory, or design a 40-storey tower building, for instance. One memorable morning, the guy actually collapsed in the office and was carted off to hospital in an ambulance. Only to return later that day, in a wheelchair, carrying an oxygen mask. That was how little he trusted us to do any work in his absence. Plus, there were vital emails that weren't going to send themselves. So he really taught me how to win friends and influence people, that guy. And he definitely helped me to understand how much work is too much work. Now, I don't want to concentrate on my current role too much because, let's be honest, my boss is in the room this evening. Hi, Gary! And just to be clear, my boss is not my dad. And I'm pretty confident that if I concentrated too much on that role, it might end up with me getting my P45. Plus, of course, Cundall's a lovely place to work and I'm surrounded by lovely colleagues. Yeah, it's awesome. But you could do better, come on. But what I do want to focus on is a bit about the role of the structural engineering designer. For those who don't know, structural engineering is the branch of engineering for people who studied civil engineering at university but found drainage and roads too exciting and had to do some hard sums to calm themselves down. Civil engineering, as you know, is full of dubious construction practices like sleeving your piles and spreading your flanges. And that is an actual thing, by the way, and you can actually buy a tool called a flange spreader. And you can even buy wedges to hold your flanges open once you've spread them. The internet is absolutely full of surprises. I think the biggest surprise might actually be, though, what my boyfriend Steve's IT department think when they see his internet search history. Shouldn't have used your work laptop for that one. Sorry. Anyway, so not that I found tunnel boring machines too dull or anything like that, but I decided to focus on structures. And that's why I now spend my days talking about erections rather than shafts. It's the higher class of innuendo. And of course, structural engineering itself is also riddled with childish innuendos. Only the other day, I found myself having a conversation with my colleagues Gemma and Tom, who are also here. Hello. It was about full penetration butt welds. It was a very serious matter. The shear between the web and the flange, yeah, we've got flanges in structural engineering too, was pretty high, and we were discussing the best type of weld for our plate girder. I know, it makes the boring machine sound exciting. And despite managing to have a perfectly sensible conversation about this, somewhere in my brain there was still an 18-year-old student roaming around, willing me to burst out laughing as we discussed the merits of full penetration versus partial penetration. Anyway, the other reason that I don't want to leave Cundall is, of course, that it's a very nice office to work in. We recently moved into a beautiful new office designed with employee health and well-being in mind. And being the group of clever engineers that we are, when we had a plant room on the ground floor, we found ourselves thinking, why waste this valuable space on fan core units, boilers and chillers when we could have a meeting room? And so, it turned out that I would need a watering can at work after all. And 18-year-old me was right all along.